printing. Okay, so a bowl, a wrench, a pen, and a gear. Something that all three of these objects have in common is that they can be 3D printed. But those are relatively simple objects, and 3D printers are capable of far more complex things. For example, they can make a car, a house, a sandwich, even a prosthetic ear. And basically these really interesting inventions are what got me interested in 3D printing, and that's why I pursued learning more about it for my 2010 project. So basically the reason why I wanted to look at 3D printing, as I said, was just because there's so much in the field and I wanted to learn more about it. And it's really just an insanely fast-growing field. There's all these new inventions coming about. I saw a statistic that the market's expected to go by 500% in the next 5 years, which is pretty large for most things. And so now I'm going to talk about some of the stuff that 3D printers can make. So as I mentioned, they can 3D print a car. This is the Stratty, which is made by Local Motors. And it's a 3D printed electric car, which mainly printed, but there are some components such as the engine, which were not 3D printed. Some more information, it's 3D printed basically from the body is made out of a plastic and carbon fiber, and the car is road legal in the United States, so it's not released yet, but it will be eventually, and people will be able to drive this on the road. And something like I think when I look at this, I really think about what it could turn into and how it'll show that a lot of the time 3D printing is used for prototypes, but it shows that it can be used to make full consumer products. And additionally, the idea that comes from it is like replaceable parts. So if something breaks on your car, you can 3D print a new one and install it relatively easily. A house. So this is the Sun Decoration Design Co. 3D printed villa. And basically what it's made out of is the walls are made out of a special 3D printed material, which comes from recycled waste. And so it helps it doesn't use up resources, and it kind of helps the environment simultaneously. And so the house, it's fairly large, it's 1,100 square meters, and it cost about $161,000 for it to be created, which is not very expensive for a house. And so part of what this whole villa can turn into and 3D printing houses, it allows for some customization in the future, because this material can be printed in different colors and textures, and through this you can have more individualized houses, and it can encourage like individual building of unique homes for people. So food. There are 3D printers that are capable of printing food. This one is called the Houdini, pretty clever name, but it basically uses capsules to extrude food in a shape. It's not the most interesting. I don't really get the point of it too much, but I like the idea behind it and what it can potentially turn into. When I look at the Houdini, I feel like the current design, doesn't have a lot of point, but I see the future and how 3D printing can turn into easily produce food from certain things like capsules or something along the line, distant future ideas. And then you can use, if you have these pre-prepared materials, you put them on like a spacecraft, long voyages. But it's interesting to what it could be, even though it's not too much in its current state. Okay, so the 3D printed ear. This is an interesting one. It's basically an implant, which is for people who were born with a defect that causes them to not have a earlobe or an ear. And so basically they developed this to be inserted below the skin, and the new layer of skin will go around the scaffolding, as they call it, and then it can be implanted onto the body, and then they'll have something that looks like an ear even though they don't technically have one. And so it provides benefits in that. Currently there are several trials underway, and this whole idea kind of can develop into, I've seen research where people are trying to 3D print things with individual cells, which is really interesting. And so it could turn into something really impressive in the future, depending on where the science goes. So the last thing that I want to talk about that can be 3D printed is 3D printers themselves, which I think is really amazing, that basically we have these self-replicating machines, commonly referred to as rep wraps. And so basically, just the idea that if your neighbor has a 3D printer, he can give you the materials then to make your own 3D printer, kind of like a pyramid scheme, except a lot more beneficial to society. Alright, so now let's talk about that. So basically, as I showed you several things that I found during my research, I consider my project a success since I did learn more about 3D printing. Additionally, I played around with some 3D modeling, as you can see up there. I made that in a program called SketchUp. While most of it was a success, there were some failures. I wasn't too involved in the social media with Twitter usage. It's kind of minimal on my part. And so what I learned as a whole, as I said, is pretty much, I learned a lot about 3D printing and all these different things that are happening in the field. And there's just a lot of potential there and a lot of things that have yet to be done. And I find it really inspiring. And this quote that I found kind of strikes it. Everything is theoretically impossible until it is done. So there's lots of ideas that have yet to be done with this 3D printers and this medium. It's just really interesting to see where it could go to.
Cool. Thanks. Are there any questions for Stephen? Any questions? Thanks, Stephen.